Hey everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Buddy Study Group for Worksite Solutions. And I hope you're ready for some education on education, because that's what today's session is going to be. We're going to be talking a little bit about group long-term care education. We're going to talk through, from a high level, what employees want versus what they need as far as education about group long-term care, how educating on group long-term care can in many ways be different from educating on other employee benefits. We'll talk a little bit about, of course, what goes into our approach to educating employees, not just from, a comms standpoint, but from how we make self-service education available and how we conduct our webinars and what we're really talking about during those sessions to make sure employees are getting what they want, what they need. So feel free to ask us any questions as we go. And let's dive right into it. So, group long-term care, you've probably heard us say this before, but it is a very different beast to other employee benefits. And I think if you've sold any long-term care in the past, you have an idea of this, especially if you sell any other products alongside it. Long-term care is something that has a pretty long sales cycle, and oftentimes in the group space, we don't have the luxury of a super long time to be able to educate and market and get people to the point where they'll participate in a plan. So we have to act fast and we have to be efficient and we have to have a really good plan together in order to make the enrollment a success. And that's also partially why employer funding helps enrollment so much, right? You can kind of skip the line, so to speak, in awareness and engagement if the employer is willing to put some skin in the game to purchase something for an employee. It's much easier for them to want to engage in the education when it's from the perspective of, come learn a little bit about what I've purchased for you, as opposed to come look at what you have the opportunity to purchase, right? I think that helps. I also think that, whoops, sorry, I hit ask to unmute on somebody you don't need to unmute. Um, I also think it helps when those who actually own a plan are able to kind of distribute word of mouth marketing on your behalf, right? Especially if it's something like an executive carve out, people are much more willing to be engaged and kind of understand what's in play if somebody they really know, like, and respect owns it and is talking to them about it. So um, that's kind of the perspective. We've got to get a lot of education, a lot of discovery in there in a short amount of time. So I think, and Gretchen, you're kind of a master of this area with your terming of a journey of discovery when it comes to long-term care education. But I think there is a little bit of a difference between what employees need and need to hear as far as education goes, and what they want to hear as far as education goes. And I think it really depends. Everybody's coming from a different perspective, a different corner of long-term care awareness when we're starting off. But I think, they need to hear what are the basics of long-term care. How do you plan for long-term care? How will this help you plan for long-term care? And many of the employees are thinking, I got to find out what this costs. I got to find out what I'm getting out of this. I got to find out how the plan works. So we really have to do a good job of marrying both, right? Any thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
yeah. And it's different depending on whether you're working with an employer group, so an HR team that normally does communicate with their employees, so their communication process is stronger, versus an association where their communication might be rather sort of mm, uh, not the strongest, especially when it comes to like email communication. So there's that piece that you have to sort of work through. And then and on the employer side, it's really comes down to them hearing from someone they know and trust is, as soon out of the gate as possible, because it establishes sort of uh, the products. You're going to educate them on the need and the why, because most of them don't know that. But um, hearing from somebody that they know who's been through an experience, so your internal advocate, usually tends to be pretty powerful too. So on the employer side, it's a little bit easier. I don't even know if I would say use the term easier. It's just different
Everybody's
because
bunched
the
up, right?
right, and because the communication channels are stronger than on the association side. Um, so but so you have to work through the different styles, and with the association side being a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, if there's no eyeballs, there's no education, right?
Right. Well,
So
yeah.
to figure out, where everybody's eyeballs are primarily, be it company intranet, be it a group where everybody uses email and everybody is constantly monitoring their email, be it social media, be it Slack, be it whatever, to be able to reach them, number one, is super important. But then there's a bit of well, there's not a bit of there is a solid plan in place whenever we start an enrollment as to how we're going to tackle each long-term care concept, right? From really opening our eyes, first and foremost, awareness of long-term care, all the way through to what does this plan cover, right? We have a very long runway, relatively speaking, where we try to lay that out in a way that's not cramming messages every single day for a week on the last week of enrollment, but really giving them some time to digest.
Yeah, and I have to say that you're really starting with, first of all, if it's an employer and there's employer funding, that's just a whole different world.
It's a
So
cheat
it's
code.
just it just me it makes, so then you're really focused on um, helping them understand what that amount, how tangible that amount is relative to what their costs could be, and then having them look at, if there's a buy up offer, having them look at that. So there's that, and then yeah, on the both employer and associations sides, you're looking at then what are their main channels, and trying to plug into the channels that they normally use to communicate. So that journey that Jason was just talking about, yeah, it can be a little bit daunting when you're thinking about, oh, I need to educate them through email, through newsletters, through intranet, through some associations do mail, direct snail mail. So it's really focusing on the channels where they have traditionally had the strongest engagement with the employee or association member.
Yeah, and like really all of us on the call, we started on the individual side of long-term care, and a lot of our experience has come from working with leads that have been pre-educated in some way, shape, or form, from an influencer to, a piece of marketing content to having had personal experience before, whatever it may be. People are generally getting to us, with some sort of idea of what long-term care is. And with the group side, you may be exposed to people who would not have come our way or would not have found out about long-term care or long-term care planning for a while later if it weren't for the offer that their employer is getting. So for many, we need to start at the very building blocks of the enrollment. And I do see we have a question. Ken is looking to see a sample presentation or presentations. Yeah, I can definitely go through our sample webinar deck, and I think we have Wendy here. And if she's on, she can kind of weigh in as well, because Wendy and I are often the main webinar partners for the groups that we speak with, and we have a heck of a lot of fun doing it. So we can talk through some of the concepts that we go over there. And we do, I believe, in the buddy system, have more of an employer pre-sale facing presentation deck that we have for you all. But a lot of the times, I would say most are leaning on us for the webinar support. And you can kind of feel free to follow our lead there, but we'll go through each of the items we talk about in just a little bit here. Um, Gretchen, is there anything else that you want to discuss about just the practice of education and how we kind of roll out an education marketing plan when we have an active enrollment, or does it just make sense to show it out in practice?
Here, let me share my screen here. I'm
Okay.
going to show a piece of it, and then Jason, you can dive into the specifics. But we have a playbook. So it's always going to vary depending on the organization. So like I said, if it's an employer-employee relationship versus an association, the the planning process is the same, but the channels, the cadence, the messaging could be a little bit different. So we start with first of all, we actually start with determining what the channels are. So what are the strongest channels where we can plug in content? And then we agree on those, and we schedule dates, webinars, all of that. Then we get into creating the actual content itself. So we're creating, Buddy creates the enrollment landing page that will then take them to the enrollment portal where they would actually enroll. But this is pure all educational. So there's basically LTC 101, why you would want this. The calculator is on the page. I don't think I have, do I have that? Yeah, the calculator will be on the landing page so they can sort of take uh, more responsibility on themselves to really figure out what would work for them over the long term. So we give them the calculator, which is always a hit. Um, we may provide content for their intranet or their own website if it's an employer or association, and that includes embedding the calculator. If they want to do that, we'll do that. We can embed the calculator. This is just the front page of the webinar.
You'll see this. I'll take you through
Yeah,
this.
that Jason will take you through. And then we get into, are you going to do emails? So we get into the email series, and pre-enrollment would be a series of educational emails, which is really taking one main point on something that we know they don't understand, that most people don't understand about long-term care. And we kind of hone in on that point through like a series of questions or just something that makes it interesting and not insurancy looking. You know what I mean? Not that there's anything wrong with that, but we want to draw them in. So we go through a series of those. So it could be anywhere from 2 to like 5, depending on how much time we have before the enrollment actually starts. And then we get into the enrollment emails. So these are the ones that are, the enrollment has started, click the link, learn more, and then they can enroll, boom. It's also, these educational webinars here will also be, if there's a webinar scheduled, we'll promote the webinar and get them to register for the webinar. So there's that too. So there's a lot of activity going on, both just before the enrollment and then during the enrollment. And then once they get into the platform, if they're using our enrollment platform, I can speak directly to this. Once they start the enrollment, if they don't finish it, they'll be receiving sort of little nudges from the enrollment platform directly to remind them to finish their application. So, and then we have other tools, other collateral that we can provide depending on like I said, the different channels that we've identified for each enrollment. So, yeah, that's pretty much it in a like 2.5 minute nutshell.
You did a really good job given how much is in play there, and I can't explain to you guys how much of a lift that this is for enrollments, how much this does behind the scenes that you may not see as maybe somebody who's involved in a case as a broker, but this is the MVP. You know, the education is really key. If people don't know about it for one and know how it works for two, and number three, don't have an easy way to get in and get involved and participate, you're not going to have much of an enrollment to speak of. So,
Natalie asked about newsletters. We don't do create newsletters, but we have content that can be used in it's usually well employer or association newsletters. Yeah, even
yeah.
magazines. Right now, we're working on something for an employer has or association has a magazine, a printed magazine. So.
Yeah, and then she also asked about like custom branding and logo.
Mhm.
Um, Generally, for every group enrollment, there are, a series of people and logos involved. So it could be the association and associated brokerage. It could be the employer and associated brokerage or agent or agency.
Mhm.
That's something we generally do as part of our full service enrollment as we go through things. Um, but I don't know as far as the playbook if we have anything like that that's custom, Gretchen, but you
What do
can
you?
feel, like custom branded to somebody's brokerage, the
Oh,
playbook you just showed. I think that would be just kind of an example you could show as to how we would go about putting a marketing and education plan together. And then from there, you could show them that this is something that we customize for every enrollment to make sure the employees recognize the names and logos they're hearing from. If I did a good enough job explaining that, Gretchen.
you did. Yeah. So we'll definitely customize adding logos and uh, relationships because you do have to do sort of that trust transfer. So because they don't know us from Adam, so we
Yep.
definitely want to make sure that we include the logos of the organizations that they might that they're associated with.
Yeah. So I want to keep the show instead of tell going. So I do want to show you guys, and many of you have seen this before, but for those of you who haven't, show off the amazing landing pages that Gretchen and her team put together for these enrollments, um, and that we kind of, as a community, make sure are rounded out to each different opportunity, their underwriting offer, and what have you. So employees will often find themselves on a page like this. If it's just a long-term care enrollment, you're going to see more of just one solid page sort of setup. But we do work with accident insurance, critical illness insurance, short-term disability, cancer products. So there are a number of different products that could be used in the same enrollment. I'll show you the long-term care page here. Um, and depending on what product they're using, they'll see this kind of right up front. They'll get a little introductory spiel about what product we're introducing them to through this web page. We'll do long-term care 101, keep it nice and simple, and understand what the long-term care challenge is in the United States today and why do you need it? We're taking it from the very, very basics and, getting more complex from there as more people are aware and start to understand that this might be something they should pay attention to, right? Talking through how the plan works. Again, very simply, we don't need to write them a book. We need to give them what they need, knowing that we're probably dealing with a limited attention span. Because believe it or not everybody rolls out of bed wanting to learn something new about long-term care every day. So we got to catch them while the iron's hot and give them just what they need and not exhaust them throughout this process, right? But we're also, um, people will read and engage with information a lot more if it's a picture book compared to just a solid wall of text, right? So we give them an idea of the costs of long-term care, um, what kind of a standard benefit might contribute to them being able to fund against the cost of long-term care. We give the carrier specific brochure in here. I think this is a really good exercise, and Wendy and I will probably talk about this as we go through the webinar because this is one of the most common questions we get. Don't any of my other insurances cover me for long-term care? And we're able to kind of go tab by tab and understand exactly how much coverage they're going to get from, say, health, disability, Medicare, Medicaid, other popular insurance programs. And then as they get down and kind of consume some of this education, as well as being able to navigate up here, as I kind of alluded to, there are things employees need to know about long-term care. They need to understand the long-term care issue, how to plan for it, the why, all that good stuff. They're thinking the whole time, all right, I get it. How much does it cost? What am I getting in exchange, right? So on a self-service basis, we make these calculators available to employees to come in and get an idea of what their premium might be. Oftentimes, we default to lower benefit amounts to give people an idea that this is a very accessible coverage at a very high value in all of the enrollments that we're doing. Not every enrollment will be looking at a 10 times value, but many will be looking at 5 times plus value for dollar on this coverage, and it's important that they're able to know that. Now, looking at it straight away, they might not be able to get that. That's why we go through them on the webinar. A lot of what we do on the webinar, at least one of them, Wendy and I, is to go through how to use some of these self-service tools because we can't be with them every second of the day as they go throughout their enrollment, and they don't want us there every second of the day. They want to discover some things for themselves too. So we show them exactly how to do that. And many of these products are hybrid life long-term care products. So we talk about what the long-term care portion does, what the life insurance portion does, and have a lot of helpful graphics so that people can understand exactly how the coverage might work. We have links straight to enroll. All right, I've seen enough. I just want to enroll. But we also have FAQs. Um, we have a way to schedule with long-term care specialist consultants if they prefer. I actually need to talk through with someone one-on-one to talk about more personally my own plan and how this is going to fit, but tons of FAQs about the products as well. So this is something that's generally standard that we do for each enrollment, along with recorded webinars, right? So this is a demo page, so it's not going to take you to a webinar recording, but we generally are posting the replay of each webinar or giving them kind of right up top when the webinar is going to be so they can make sure to attend live. And that kind of brings me to Wendy, our bread and butter here is actually getting in front of the employees and talking to them about long-term care. So, what's your experience in these webinars? Just give me some of your general thoughts. I'll have plenty, but I want to hear from you.
Well, first of all, I love doing them. And I do a lot of webinars, both with Jason and just in my previous speaking life. So I do a fair amount of them. And certainly on the LTC side, what I have found, that pre-work that Gretchen was talking about is so critical so we can get attendance at the webinar. If it's not done right, and she does it beautifully, it feeds the people into the webinar. Average person, and I'm always a little surprised by this, is a 45-year-old. And
Yep.
you go out in the individual market and it's like 60, 65. And it is interesting too, because we'll always see a few that are, and most of them are women when I look at the registrants, that will attend the webinar. I mean, there's been some that it's it might be 50-50, but primarily women want to know. They want to have the answer. They have a spouse, they have a partner, they understand the need, they understand all of that. They want to know how it works. And in those first, we'll do typically 2 webinars, sometimes 3 with that same group. We'll go through the nuts and bolts of it. And people really appreciate that. We get the questions all the time. Why is this any different than my long-term disability insurance? How does that work? And so those come up in every webinar. I think also, yeah, the questions that we get, we go through it and have a lot of fun. It's not salesy, and I think, boy, every time that we talk to a pre-group and they're ready to do the enrollment and it's down the road, they know it's coming, they really always say, please don't make this salesy. And
Yep.
again, pre-work that Gretchen does in all of those mailings and how she works with that particular HR and that group is amazing. And that's always reiterated. So we don't sell anything. A lot of times Jason, we'll get the comments from the group as we're going through, going, they know they're in the healthcare industry. They get this. They
Hmm.
understand it. So those kind of tidbits always help us guide us through our webinar, so we don't have to spend a whole lot of time on some of these areas. Cost is always, they want to know the cost. What's it going to cost me? 45-year-old, it's not that much money, but you got 45-year-olds who have 18-year-old kids going to college. So I mean, putting a price tag on it and then showing the leverage, showing the value, and we bring them along that journey that Gretchen always talks about. And at the end, you want a successful enrollment. And we tell them how. Jason goes through it beautifully, or Mark, how you enroll. And they want it simple, and we created it simple. And I think that's one of the great, great features here.
Yeah, you got to back it up with an easy process. You got to back it up with actually showing them how to engage. I think even if you're a long-term care specialist who's working as part of a group enrollment, a lot of the sale that you do is just helping people engage with some of the self-service tools or going through them with them, right? And I like what you said about how we mirror kind of Gretchen's journey of discovery. Generally, we'll do 2 webinars per group. Most of them prefer that, not just to make sure that those who couldn't attend the first one can attend the second or vice versa, but also we can kind of switch it up and cover different things. And we're very sensitive to where in the enrollment period we're having the webinar so that we can speak to the topics that are most relevant to that point of the enrollment, right? So in the beginning, we'll walk through. We'll talk about yeah, there's just sample enrollment dates here, but we'll give a quick agenda, right? We'll introduce us. We'll go through some of the major topics that we'll discuss. But the first webinar, I think, is really more about long-term care planning. Why long-term care? What long-term care, right? So, what is it? How are people commonly planning for it? How have we personally been affected by it so people can understand how long-term care plays out? Whether it's myself, whether it's Wendy, whether it's Mark, we're giving our own personal long-term care stories and why we're in this industry doing this in the first place. Um, and that helps put people in the shoes of, oh, I've had a long-term care experience myself, or even if I haven't had one directly, I know a family who's been affected by long-term care, or I know one of my fellow employees is going through something like that right now. And it helps kind of make it personal and it helps them discover the problem we're actually trying to solve, right? So the first webinar is very much going over some of the common long-term care issues, right? Somebody who's taking care of a loved one, um, putting their life on hold in some way, shape, or form, be it small or large, to be able to care for a loved one, um, is definitely a rampant problem throughout the United States. It's an issue that we're trying to solve to a degree. We're trying to help that family caregiver um, take a more hands-off role while their loved one is still able to get the care they need. I mean, how great would it be if instead of your son or daughter having to take care of you, they're instead more of the overseer of the professional caregiver that they will have, right? They're helping you walk through the different long-term care options. Can we have somebody come into the home to take care of us? Do we have to look at assisted living or some other facility? And kind of taking you around that college tour rather than having to be the one to put hands on as far as the caregiving. Now, there's nothing wrong with family caregivers, but we would like them to, if it's a fit, have a role that's a bit more efficient for them, gives them more of their life back to be able to, um, have their pursuits in life and not have to put that on hold, right? Talking about how long-term care can happen at any age, right? You don't have to just be 87 years old to receive long-term care. There's a stigma out there. When you hear long-term care, you're like, oh, that's a nursing home when I'm 90 years old, right? But it's a problem that affects many today. Talking about our care stories, and then, I mean, how good of a healthy aging advocate do we have when we have an Olympics, gold, silver, bronze medalist on talking to them about what their employer is offering, right? So we're very blessed to have Wendy there to help advocate and tell her story as well, right? And I think this is one of our most important slides. Correct me if I'm wrong, Wendy, but as far as introducing people to the long-term care issue,
Yeah.
this is the big one, I think. There's
Mhm.
many ways to plan for long-term care. We see a few major pillars, right? Family caregiving, we've already talked about to this point, but self-funding, paying for professional caregivers out of pocket, and the insurance side, we're obviously going to cover throughout the webinar, but also talking about how is the government there for us for long-term care, if at all, right? And kind of understanding the Medicare versus Medicaid common misconception that we see a lot, understanding Medicaid as a plan of last resort, and understanding that most people are not doing just one of these pillars. They're doing some of all of these pillars as they're planning for long-term care, right? So the plan we're talking about is just one piece of a holistic long-term care plan, right? Um, Again, this is not shaming people for preferring family caregivers or preferring self-funding. It's just helping to understand that that may be one piece of a greater plan that you might not be aware of that can really help you cover all of your bases and make sure you can get through a very fluid extended care event. Um, Wendy, anything else on this one?
No, I do like this. And you and Mark always talk about the payroll tax because they've heard that at their, in their own state, they've gotten information that sometimes it's not correct. So I think that's really, really important.
Yep.
Always like that
Talking
point.
about that it's out there, obviously talking about that there was one experience in Washington State. There's states that are rumored to have a payroll tax, but we keep the language very much
Yeah,
as if this is something you were going to plan to do anyway, it doesn't necessarily matter if a payroll tax comes down with an opt-out. It's your opportunity to do something now and not having to worry about the future, right? Or not having to worry about the future of Medicare or Medicaid. Many employees are concerned about that. I'm going to work all these years. Will I have anything there when I retire? This is an option to take it into your own hands, right?
yeah, yeah,
And then we go through a number of FAQs. If we don't have a chat full of questions by now, we just kind of go through some of the most common questions we're asked about long-term care. And for those of you, this slide might be pretty illuminating who are on with us. These are some of the most common questions.
yeah,
What age do I typically use long-term care? What if I already have it? Can I buy more later? What age is it best to buy insurance? I'm sure even in the individual world, you guys are asked this all the time. What age is it best to buy insurance? And guess what? Our answer is at your youngest, healthiest, and cheapest, which tends to be today. But it's not, something that everybody's able to do today. But I'd say as soon as you can, as soon as it's a fit for your budget, right? And when am I eligible? So these are some of the most common questions, but as Wendy said, we also get, I already have disability insurance. Why do I need long-term care? Aren't they the same thing? And that's where we're able to kind of set them up as synergistic sister products. If you have some sort of shorter long-term disability, that's going to replace your income, but it's not going to pay for the care you may need as a result of a disability, right? So both of them kind of come together for a really nice lifestyle protection, should you have a need for extended care or have a long-term disability. And then generally, depending on wherever the group is, we don't harp on this slide, but it's good to give them an idea of what the costs of long-term care are. So guess what? We use the Genworth cost of care study. We introduce them to all the different ways people could receive care in their home, in assisted living, in a nursing home, adult daycare, um, and just give people an idea of what's expected to happen with long-term care costs. And it brings us back to the other slide. Yes, this could look scary to you. It's our job to kind of inform you of what the costs of care are out there so you can, protect yourself adequately how you see fit. But it goes back to it's not just about purchasing enough insurance to cover the cost of care. You're going to be using a combination of all of these pillars to make it work, right? At the end of the day. So the most important thing is that you're aware of it. And if you're in a position to do something about it, you have a plan, written, verbal, otherwise, insurance, funding wise. This is to really wake you up to having a long-term care plan and understanding that it's an issue to plan for. Then, depending on the product, we'll talk through what the plan really offers, right? Understanding some of the big benefits, right? Guaranteed issue. It's portable if you separate from your employer. There's life insurance if you don't use long-term care. There's simplified issue underwriting. Generally, they'll roll you back to guaranteed issue maximum if you can't get through that underwriting. Spouses you can cover. So we talk through a lot of the product there. And then we're generally going to have just the main bullets. We'll have a QR code that takes them to this landing page that they can go through. And we'll generally finish up with a demo of the landing page, biggest one of all, since they're thinking about cost. Oftentimes we'll even lead with this, right? To give them an idea of what resources are there, then take them through. You got an idea of this plan, what it costs, but why plan for it, right? But we'll take them through a demo of the calculator. I'll explain every little input here so that they can really go on that journey for themselves. I'll encourage them to schedule time with a specialist because everybody's situation is different, right? This is generally how we're doing the first enrollment. And I think the second enrollment, Wendy, we generally do about a week before the enrollment
Yeah.
period ends,
Yeah.
which is generally the time everybody applies.
Yeah.
No matter how good of a job you do on a webinar, no matter how much you drive the point home, no matter how many questions you answer, no matter how many people say, great session, thank you at the end of the first webinar, people are going to wait till the last week. Whether they're taking time to meet with someone, whether they're taking it home to talk about it with their spouse, whether they're a procrastinator, whether they're just truly not sure until they get right up to it, and then their instincts kind of take over. People wait till the last week to enroll a lot of the time, a high percentage of people. So on that last webinar, we'll talk through a little bit more about product, the enrollment platform itself, depending on the platform we're using, we'll be able to take them through, kind of give them a demo of how to enroll. We do a little bit more in-depth on the calculator. It's less about discovering long-term care and what the issue is. It's by now you've seen one webinar or you've seen a lot of the emails that have gone out. You've watched a recorded video of, the owner of your company talking about their personal long-term care story. You understand that piece. Now it's time to know what to do with it with regard to the product that's in front of you, right? And how to
Yeah.
understand the common questions that are asked on the application that could trip people up, what to have ready to make sure that that enrollment experience truly is 5 to 10 minutes and you're checking out with
Yeah.
a certificate of coverage, right?
And it's always fun on the second one because we always encourage on the first webinar to bring your spouse to the second webinar, and we do find that. Gretchen will probably know, and certainly our our different groups would know, but I do believe by the number in the second webinar that more and more are bringing their partner, their spouse, or somebody from the office in. You've got to hear this. I think on the guaranteed issue, the portability, the unisex pricing, I mean, we talk about that through both webinars. And that's so significant if anybody's looked at the individual side, which depending on the group, if they're white collar group, oh yeah, they've looked on the individual side. They are now 65 years old and they know they can't get it on the individual side of what they want. So when we talk about the cost, what does that look like? Some of these men and women that are 20s and 30s and 40s, and this, Jason and Mark, is where I think that we are really, really good because we talk about, look, something is going to be better for your family than nothing. So if it's $1,000 or $2,000, would that help you? And I always think of my mom's story. I mean, God, we paid 7 of us kids $8,200 a month in, month out, year in, year out. And at some point, I don't care how wealthy people are, you do cry uncle. If somebody had said to us, God, would a couple $1,000 help you guys every month? Darn right, because the 7 of us paid out 500,000. We were all able to put that money in, but watching 300,000 go out of each of our accounts to help pay for mom's care, which she lived just long enough before we had another bill. And, it's interesting because in nursing homes, especially assisted living, I don't know, but on nursing homes, you pay that full month, even if you die the middle of the month, which always is like, oh my God. But anyway,
Yeah.
getting back to just explaining something, even how can this help your family? And I think
Yeah,
we,
and I think we keep it very real life practical as well. We
yeah,
kind of try to put them in the shoes of somebody who's taking care of
yep.
a parent or a loved one and spending 8 to 12 hours a day doing so. Then you start to realize that 1,000, 2,000 bucks a month is a couple hours a day of care for somebody to come in. And that's a breather. That's a chance to go to the grocery store. That's a chance to catch up on work. That's a chance to just get out and spend an hour with a friend to really kind of take yourself out of that situation. And that's what really helps as well because I don't think everybody comes into these enrollments expecting to um, bulletproof themselves for long-term care, but it's important that they know that even a couple hours of care a day or week is huge if you're going to be or your kids are going to be the fallback caregiver, right? Understanding that respite means a lot is huge.
Can I comment on that? Because that's like sort of top of mind for me right now.
Of course you may.
When and this is regardless of whether you're doing group or individual. Um, I I try not to get too in the weeds on cost because you might as well if you tell someone who has not yet planned for long-term care. I know we all get excited when the new cost of care data comes out from Genworth. But it's like to me, it's like it's kind of
Bit,
silly because you
little
can
bit.
you could yeah you can tell someone that it's $6,000 a month, or the updated is $6,500 a month, or you might as well say $11 billion a month
Yes.
because
Yes.
they're not there. It's just so overwhelming.
Yeah, it
So
is.
what Jason's saying, I think is the right approach, and that is, you know, don't get so caught up in having the ability to cover all the costs. Cover what you can afford. Cover what you can afford for long-term care insurance for the long term. Don't worry about your costs in 2040 are going to be 15 grand a month. It's like I could never
Cool.
buy enough insurance to cover that. So that's, start them out small, get them used to planning,
Yeah.
get them, let them play around with the calculator. Um, and then they'll sort of slowly, uh, get used to what it is that they can figure out how, what they can afford over the long term, not just, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to cover this. So I'm just closing down this page because I don't understand how I'm going to do this anyway. So
100%. And that's where you start to get like completely unrealistic answers from clients that you're sitting across as far as like what is your plan for long-term care. If you've shown them that it's going to cost like $10,000 a year to fund a plan for them, that's where you start to get the clients that are ridiculous. Oh, I'm just gonna have them, take me out back. I'm just gonna die, right? Like you've shown them something where they feel like they need to put up this defense mechanism or say it's probably just better to, kick the bucket than to spend all this money, right? I mean, you have to make it practical and you have to help them understand how a manageable premium can provide real world benefit if they find themselves in that situation for
yeah,
them and their family at the end of the day. Because it goes back to what I said in the beginning. We're talking about people who are having their first experience at understanding what the long-term care problem is. So they need to know how to easily and effectively bring positive change in a scenario where they might be encountered by it, right?
No, and I agree with both you and Gretchen on that. You don't want to overwhelm them because it is overwhelming. But I also point out the fact that cost of care is growing. And I
Yeah.
also point out 42 years ago when my dad needed care, we couldn't afford a nursing home and it was 18 bucks a day. So the reality
oh
of
my God.
people going thinking, well, it's hardly goes up, is false, right? Because it does go up. But to everyone's point, something is going to help the family. And long-term care is never about the person who is going to enroll. It's about the family. And I point that out throughout. And it's not, look, if you love your family, then you should have long-term care insurance. It's about if you needed care today at 39 or 69 or 99, what is that plan? And there's a couple ways to address it. So I think
Yeah,
that
it's so
reality,
important. Wendy, you make a good point. I don't think we're in the business of being up there and virtue signaling to these employees either. We're just trying to show
right,
them how to make an impact in a
right.
specific situation that they may run into. And I think that resonates pretty well with people. Just if you're practical,
Yeah.
they will understand what you're saying. And I think for us, the goal is to get people to start a plan, whether insurance is part of it or not, because that person will eventually find themselves in a scenario where maybe they're able to do a little bit more than they started with, or I couldn't plan now, but I can plan in 5 years, or
Well,
this is
and you're
something
right.
that I'm earmarking now on my financial goals to be able to set aside money for,
And
right?
to be
That's
able to have a group policy for long-term care that hasn't been around, like that is a total gift. It's a total opportunity. And we just help them see what the opportunity is. It's their money, it's their life, it's their family. We're just taking them through this. Like what, I mean, how unbelievable is it that companies that we've got great carriers that are offering this to employers and associations? I mean, to me, it's phenomenal. And then all the guarantees that go with it. Again, the guaranteed benefits, the level premium, God, guaranteed issue, the portability, the fact that it's the benefits. You just look at all the benefits that you get.
yeah.
Um, Anyone on this call, I don't get all this wound up. You're probably like, oh my God, is she like that on the webinar? No, I am not. I am not. But it's really just taking them through that. And it's amazing because we do get questions. We'll get emails after and go, God, Jason, you made such a good point. And they'll circle all of us in. And my 95-year-old mother just went through this. I wish we had something. So we open the doors, we open their minds, and we give them an opportunity to do something and to help them.
Yeah. And you all may find yourselves in a position where you are the one giving the presentation. And I think we've gotten in our own heads before when it comes to presentations, especially when we were new to this. But I think when you take the perspective of this is a great opportunity to be able to educate people and
Yeah.
make them just aware, first and foremost, you start to have a little bit more fun and things start to be a little bit more easy to talk about when it's just, I'm trying to make people aware of long-term care first and foremost, right?
One thing I want to add too, just real quick. Wendy said, "Oh, I don't get all wound up." It's a good thing that you get wound up.
She does, and it's
Honestly,
awesome.
probably the biggest reason why people are going to buy is because of your confidence, enthusiasm. They're trusting your advice here. So more than even the information that we're all talking about here, the ability for you to be confident in your recommendation is probably the biggest factor of all.
Yeah.
So,
100%. I think that's about all I had. So I'm happy that everybody was kind of able to see start to finish how we handle education and just kind of our philosophy. Maybe it wasn't what you expected from the outset, but I think we try to keep things really practical. We try to understand where the employees are, with long-term care. We don't assume that anybody's an expert. We don't assume that everybody doesn't have information, and sure, it can kind of be a challenge to manage that with an audience, but I think, like Mark said, just confident messaging, putting a plan together, really leaning on the employer to understand their employee base, their culture, what matters to them, where they are. Um, all of that really comes together, that thoughtfulness with a long enough runway. At the beginning, I kind of mentioned that the issue is long-term care is a long sales cycle. It takes a lot of education and awareness, and we have to cram that into a short bit of time. But with some work, with some information going back and forth between you and the group, with a good enough runway, with good enough engagement, you can still help, get a lot of people a plan, maybe their first plan, maybe something that's going to support an existing plan. Thanks, Jackie. We love you. Um, I think that's all I got. Does anybody have anything else they want to add? Anything else they want to ask while we have 5 minutes, or should I set you
I just
free?
want to add something real quick. That it is after all of this, it is possible that the initial launch of the benefit just won't take hold. And there can be a lot of different reasons for that. We look at the census and we try to figure out, what's the best path forward for a particular group. But sometimes, best intentions and best processes, it just doesn't work out. So then you take a look at, if you're part of the process, you take a look at what happened and you try to figure out how to move forward. So, we always say, and Jason just said it is a long process. It's a different kind of a sale. That is very education focused. But it could take a couple of turns before you actually start gaining some momentum. So just don't want, I don't want people to get discouraged if the first time out it just doesn't happen with a particular group. It'll happen. You just have to
It,
keep keep moving forward.
it's true. You got to be realistic, right? You get this wonderful offer, and the carrier and everybody involved is like, cool, I'll give you 30 days.
Mhm.
Go for it, right? And that can that can feel like a challenge to say the very least. But um, super
I
good
think
point you
too,
make,
though,
Gretchen.
Jason, I think too, real quick, is having the enrollment at a different time than other benefits. So
Correct.
it does get to be spotlighted, right? It
At least
just,
the first enrollment, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we're not competing with pet insurance. We're not competing with their health insurance re-enrollment. And oh my gosh, my premium's going up $45 a month. There's not any of that involved. That's why this actually tends to be a busy time of year for us for enrollments because
Yeah.
we're doing off-cycle enrollments so they can focus on long-term care first and foremost. Good point. But yeah, I think Gretchen, that's really super practical advice. Not every enrollment is going to be perfect, and I think we do get a lot of value out of meeting with the employers and brokers that we work with after the enrollment, saying what went right, what went wrong, and second go around, how can we continue to just build on what we did in the first enrollment? Super good. Um, that's all I got, guys. Gretchen, is there anything outside of
Oh,
this topic?
I'm sure that there is.
We have
I
a
just came up.
I'll tell you that we have a lot of tools that are going to be releasing in the buddy system, potentially before Tuesday, like likely before Tuesday. I may call an audible and have a study group around those tools on Tuesday. So stay tuned for that. But we have a ton that is going to help you more for the individual space this time around. We got a lot of the group tools out, and many of you are
Already.
using
Yeah.
those to really good success that we're seeing, but the individual space is going to get some love too.
Hmm.
And we can't wait to show you that.
Yep.
Any other news, or should I set you all free? I
Yeah.
mean,
I think
there's too much, but we'll gather it.
we can set them free.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here with us. We appreciate you. Take care. Be well. See you this
Bye.
time next week. Bye bye.